Thank you, Matt, and good morning. It is wonderful to be with you. I'm going to jump right in, and I would ask that you bear with me this morning. Today, I am called here to inform you about the state of the county, and in this regard, I'm going to actually be shockingly brief. The county is in a very strong position because of the outstanding work of your elected officials, the staff, and the employees at the county. It is also true that current revenues are actually declining. The Budget Office, by the way, tells us recent sales tax receipts are down 9.4% for the same month last year, with now 4 running months of decline and a 3% decline year to date over last year. So we do need to be mindful of early indications of economic changes on the horizon. There is tremendous good work going on in our offices and many of our elected officials who are here today. But unlike in previous years, I will not be highlighting their individual work. So I'm going to ask all of our office holders, department heads, and employees of the county to please stand and let us show you our appreciation. Thank you. I will sincerely ask for their forgiveness later, but please know that each one is doing outstanding work. And as you leave this morning, you can get our report to citizens that we put out that explains a lot of that good work. Now, for the next 25 minutes, I will ask you to buckle up and to hold on as I bring to our attention an issue that is affecting each of our elected officials, each staff person, each employee of the county, all of our cities, and each one of us. It is a subject that we usually just keep to ourselves. Perhaps we've been afraid to speak about it in public forums. So today, I'm not going to boast anymore about our outstanding team. And today, you will even get another year where I don't sing, okay? I am here to call for our community to face the exasperating local mental health challenges facing citizens, caregivers, and all of those seeking to help others. Many of us probably just shifted uncomfortably in our seats, thinking of a loved one, a friend, a coworker, or someone else when I said the words mental health challenges, perhaps even ourselves. You know what I'm about to say is true. Working together, though, we can bring ourselves to a place where we break down the stigmas that all too often prevent folks getting help with the needs they have. Just 2 weeks ago, we stood at a groundbreaking for a youth resiliency center that will add capacity to our mental health community. I said then that I would not use that occasion to discuss the abysmal state of mental health in this country and this state. We were there to celebrate a groundbreaking and a step in the right direction. Our first and largest ARPA award, a state-of-the-art facility that will do much good in our county. It was not the right time. We were there to thank all of our partners, including Senator Huff and Burrell Behavioral Health. Now, however, I believe is the right time to acknowledge the need. The crisis is real, despite many outstanding local organizations providing services in a variety of areas. The unpleasant truth is that many of our services are hard to navigate at best, even by trained professionals and clinicians. It is just too hard to get the services that folks need. The overall safety net of mental health services in this country is frayed, tattered, and at best a patchwork system. And our local programs are in need of vigorous examination if we are going to continue to grow and to prosper as a region. The Springfield Greene County Health Department tells us that our suicide mortality rate is 60% higher than the national average. Locally, we have seen suicide deaths increase by 30% since 2015. According to the 2022 Community Health Needs Assessment, poor mental health and the rate of depression in our community are higher than in Missouri. Locally, men over 45 are at the highest risk for death by suicide. Veterans and those in law enforcement are at a unique risk. This echoes national trends. In 2021, men in the United States were 3.9% more likely to die by suicide than women. These deaths are preventable when we take action before a person reaches a point of crisis. Mental health stigma and all the barriers that stigma creates has been a key factor in the jarring increase in suicide we've seen in our community, along with poor mental health overall. The Healthy Living Alliance of the Ozarks, a healthcare alliance focused on improving community health, wants to help men embrace conversations about mental health. They're doing so with the launch of an awareness program, a campaign that encourages men to check in on other men in their life and to be open and honest about how they're feeling. You know, that's difficult for us sometimes. These conversations don't have to be formal. It can be as simple as asking a buddy, "Hey man, you good? You good? Ma'am, are you good? We gotta make sure we take care of the ladies too. Man, you good?" These are important conversations. Here's a little transparency. I promised you that when I ran for this office, okay? In the midst of the stressful days of COVID that we all dealt with, of course, like some other elected officials, I was the target of some not-so-veiled death threats. It was a time of heightened anxiety for a lot of us. I'm certain I wasn't the only one whose life changed in unpleasant ways. But luckily during this time, I had a good friend who basically asked, "Hey, are you good? Are you okay?" When I really wasn't feeling good. And then listened to me and gave me the encouragement to talk to someone about the anxiety and depression that I was experiencing. Now, that's me doing my part to kind of break down the stigma this morning, all right? It was just what I needed to get through that very difficult time. It may be uncomfortable or awkward, but the importance of discussing mental health with the people that we care about cannot be overstated. It is a normal and healthy way to create mental well-being. Let's explore some of the impacts on the larger scale. Let me start with Sheriff Jim Arnott's office. We have 55 inmates on the wait list to get into the state mental health facility in Fulton, just to regain competency in order to stand trial. We are just one county in the state. The sheriff's mental health unit at the jail is full, and the psychologist has told us that 70% of those in the jail likely have a diagnosable mental illness. In a related issue, the Office of Pretrial Services has supplied the Greene County Courts with 1,066 public safety assessments just this year. The average amount of time a defendant has spent on supervision during this time frame is almost 300 days. These are not mental health professionals, but they see things, and they see the challenges. At a slightly earlier age, our juvenile office was responsible for the creation of the Youth Mental Health Collaborative that brings together a collaborative body of over 30 folks, including hospitals, mental health facilities, schools, children's division, law enforcement, the Division of Youth Services to collaboratively address mental health services for justice-involved youth and youth who are in foster care. Our Greene County Human Resources has experienced record-breaking attendance and participation in our Venture Wellness program this year, specifically our Lunch and Learns, Wellness Challenges, and the Wellness Expo. Our theme for the year has been Better Mind, Better Me in 23, focusing on mental health and wellness. And our public administrator oversees nearly 1,000 lives, wards of the county entrusted by the courts to her oversight. One resident of a local nursing home called me in my office to declare a bomb threat that had to be investigated. Many of our nursing homes simply cannot continue to take those that we have to find places for. Not all of the lives that she oversees are adversely impacted by mental health. However, we do not have adequate systems in place to address the extreme cases that arise. I want to highlight a mental health issue that our prosecutor, Dan Patterson, has addressed from his office. The Greene County Family Justice Center, you're aware of this, is a key county program addressing domestic violence. Alongside the mental health issues, domestic abuse can cause employees to be distracted at work, miss work, arrive late, or leave early, and increase turnover. Exposure to domestic violence has a significant impact on children's mental health. 54% of employers have reported that domestic abuse caused the quality of the employee's work to suffer, and 56% said it led to absenteeism. The Family Justice Center opened in record time, by the way, while other communities spent 5 to 10 years in the planning process. Our center opened in 2018 in less than a year. Perhaps as an indication of the level of need in our community, the Family Justice Center and its partners have provided tens of thousands of services to victims of domestic violence in the past 5 years. Now, this is the middle of my address. And in a moment, I'm going to show you a short video of a National Association of Counties, or NACO as we call it, presentation about some history of how we got here nationally. 75% of America's 3,069 counties reported an increase in the incidence of behavioral health conditions over the past year, and 72% of counties reported a serious shortage of behavioral health care workers. This speaker you're going to hear, Dr. Drew Pinsky, has spent decades practicing internal medicine. He worked for approximately 30 years at the Los Encinas Hospital, which is a full-spectrum psychiatric facility. He served as director of the Medical Services Department and became director for Chemical Dependency Services. He is double board certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and the Board of Addictive Medicine, where he is also a fellow. He served many years as an assistant clinical professor at Keck USC School of Medicine in both the departments of medicine and psychiatry. Take a listen.
I worked in a psychiatric hospital for nearly 35 years. I've seen trends come and go. I know these illnesses intimately, and I have been screaming about the mental health crisis and homelessness in this country for 20 years. I am equivalent to a surgeon who knows how to fix a specific thing, and he walks out in the street and is seeing that thing everywhere he goes and is not allowed or permitted to not only intervene, but can't even say anything about it. It has been driving me crazy. So thank you for making this a priority now. It is time. It is too long. It's odd that we in this country treat illnesses in the cranium, this organ, different than every other organ in the body. Our lungs get sick, our brains get sick, they have medical management, there are physicians dedicated to the practice of psychiatry. They need the opportunity to do their work, and we need more of them. We will talk about that a little bit. So what I wanted to do I am really tight on time, so my slides, and I will not lull you to sleep with them. The good news is I'll be fast. In fact, I'll be tachistoscopic about this. I want to frame this a little bit. Supervisor Barger is going to come out here and interview me in literally 9 minutes, and I'm going to even try to make it quicker than that if I can. But I thought I would frame her interview with a little history and a little sort of primer on where we are now. So, as they say, let's put the first slide up if we can. For those who don't study history, they're condemned to repeat it. Now, the reality is that the United States the Constitution doesn't provide for the privilege of providing mental health services. It's always been relegated to the states. Again, I'm going to go rather quickly through here. In 1945, a young psychiatrist named Robert Felix proposed to employ the prestige and resources of the national government to redirect mental health priorities. This was a massive shift. He proposed the government create a mental health research center, and he picked, in fact, a young politician by the name of Kennedy, who was sympathetic to these issues because of his sister Rosemary. As you know, she had some sort of mental illness and went through a lobotomy. Rose Kennedy, the mom, has said that was the greatest tragedy of her life, more so even than what happened to her sons. Testimony when men were coming back from the military during World War II shined a bit of a light on the fact that the men that were being excluded from military action were due to mental illness, brain disorders. So the Congress allowed for the Neuropsychiatric Institute and National Mental Health Plan. Dr. Felix at that point was the doctor advocating for all of this, and he later recounted, I wanted this bill, he was driving this, a non-elected official, that's what I want to get across to everyone. This psychoanalyst, by the way, psychoanalysis had a grip on American psychiatry for 50 years, only in this country. And so physicians for a minute forgot that they were medical doctors, and by the way, because they, as psychoanalysts, felt they knew the answers to everything, they were also big social engineers, and he wanted these acts to be as broad as possible, so there was, quote, literally nothing he couldn't do. Pretty scary. So they passed it. Very quickly, though, Dr. Felix changed the name to the National Institute of Mental Health, steering this away for any consideration of mental illness. His consideration was that they were going to create community mental health centers to prevent mental illness. Now, the commission that was put together by Dr. Felix was mostly an ideological, and I would dare say theological document. They presented the following recommendations. Number one, state mental health hospitals, state mental hospitals were beyond remedy. The future services should be coordinated by community mental health center and financial participation by the federal government, which was a new concept. Once elected, John Kennedy appointed the Interagency Committee on Mental Health. The committee was making recommendations for mental illness services, and there were some breakthroughs at the time that changed things a little bit. The advent of Thorazine changed a bit. Felix was assisted in the committee by two National Institute of Mental Health psychiatrists, Stanley Yolis, who would succeed Felix as the director of National Institute of Mental Health, and Dr. Brown, who would succeed Yolis after he made some inappropriate comments about federal drug policies and was fired. So from 1946 to 1970, the mental health policies of the federal government was dominated by three unelected psychoanalysts, and none of them had ever been in a hospital that treated mental illness, particularly not chronic mental illness. Felix, well, he worked one summer in a Colorado State hospital. Brown was a pediatrician who briefly visited a couple of state hospitals in Massachusetts, and Yolis was a parasitologist who eventually went to medical school. He did his residency at the Federal Narcotics Treatment Center. This was actually sort of the opioid farm. This is where they got into trouble with experimenting on people with LSD. Three men charged with determining the destiny of resources that had been maintained for hundreds of years in this country. Those three men determined the future. At the same time, our culture ran amok. The Myth of Mental Illness was published. Goffman argued that symptoms of mental illness were created by hospitalization. that there was nothing specific about the brain that could get sick unless you put somebody in an institution. Felix agreed with this. And then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out in 1962. When that movie came out, the American public thought they were looking at a documentary. I just recently reviewed that movie, and it was a million miles from what psychiatric hospitals are like. In October 1963, President Kennedy signs that Community Mental Health Centers Act, one of the last things he did before going to his fateful trip to Dallas. No plan for what would happen as a result of dismantling the state hospitals, right? This was focused on prevention. Also, Medicare and Medicaid came along, and Medicaid specifically excluded patients in mental institutions, which became known as the IMD exclusion, which we'll talk about a little bit. And the fact was now we had no resources for people with chronic mental illness, and the patients who were requiring, many of them institutional custodial care, were subjected and belched into the streets, the nursing homes, and the prisons. And they have remained there since. This history is critically important. Then on top of that, several legal decisions were made to make it impossible to take people from the streets to the hospital. Ultimately, an ACLU lawyer says the goal should be nothing less than the abolition of involuntary hospitalization. So, as this one psychiatrist said, with the knowledge that the state hospitals required hundreds of years to achieve their maximum size, the precipitous attempt to move large numbers of their charges into the settings that did not exist must be seen as incompetent as best and criminal at worst. So, here is what has not been taken into consideration. I have 2 minutes left. I'm sorry for jamming through this. There is something called anosognosia that is a feature of serious mental illness, brain disorders. It was coined by Dr. Babinski. It was coined to describe what happens to stroke patients, particularly left-sided, right middle cerebral artery, left-sided paralysis, where you can show people their paralyzed limb and they seem to have no awareness of it. In fact, leftness entirely becomes absent. Left side of clock, left side of room, they're gone. It's called anosognosia. Serious mental illness causes anosognosia. The person with these brain diseases loses the ability to see what is happening to them. It's called lack of insight. More common name is denial. It has a biological basis to it in serious mental illness. Stroke, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, dementia. It's in all these situations. Yes, the oddest thing in the world is when dementia causes anosognosia, and we don't rush in and help that person if they become delirious and start walking in the street, we are guilty of elder abuse if we don't intervene. While if bipolar disorder or schizophrenia creates the same symptom complex, they're living their best life. Stay away from them. How dare you? Who are you to say? It is a lack of understanding of how the brain works, what psychiatry is, what doctors do to treat serious mental illness. And right now, we are getting in big trouble. Right? Serious mental illness defined as mental, behavioral, emotional disorder resulting in serious impairment. Okay, and that's the prevalence right there by age. And look at this. This is the number of people that actually, with those illnesses, that get to care. Very few. And again, this is a map. I'm literally 45 seconds left. A map of the deficiency of psychiatric services, psychiatrists, doctors who know how to treat brain disorders. And one last thing, this is showing the increase in opioid deaths. We're not talking about addiction specifically here, but 20% now in the 20 to 29 age group of all-cause deaths is attributable to opioid addiction and death. This is years of life lost due to opioid toxicity. Look at 2021 there, that darker, it's 3 million years of life lost. And yet we continue to focus on, it should be 18 to 29 here, the probability of death from COVID in the 18 to 29-year-old is 0.000015%, and yet we're totally focused on that condition for young adults, while the one that is causing a 20% of all-cause mortality, we're allowing those people to die in the streets. It is a level of difficulty, insanity, let's call it what it is. I don't understand it. As somebody who worked in a psychiatric hospital for all those decades, it's not that hard to treat. We know how to do this. We just need the resources, we need the beds, we need the psychiatrists. I could build a program tomorrow that would actively reverse the course of these illnesses. Addiction, I'll say with one last thing. We're doing poorly. COVID made things worse. You can read this, a little slide at your leisure. But I would say this one last thing. We have all these contingencies on how we're going to deal with addiction and opioid addiction, and we're going to send nurses out, we're going to have injection sites. In addition to missing the feature of anosognosia as a feature of mental illness, we also seem to miss one other feature about addiction, particularly opioid addiction, is that it is progressive in all settings. Even if I administer the heroin to the patient, they will progress, and the progression ends in death, period.
Nursing homes, jails, and streets. That was tough stuff. He goes on to say that there is no panacea, but that we have gone from one extreme to the other, and we are paying for it dearly in dollars, lost productivity, but most importantly, in lost lives. As I've said before, we all have friends, neighbors, children, other family members, or someone we know who have faced mental health challenges. Sometimes we can feel overwhelmed and not know what to do, but the more we talk about it, the more we can overcome the stigma. Because as Dr. Pinsky has noted, there are risks of a diminished quality of life, including the progression that he described at the end. Those who work on a daily basis in the mental health field will impress upon you that mental illness does not necessarily result in criminal behavior. And I know that is true, and I want to emphasize that. But I do want to return briefly to once again praise all of our public safety officials and first responders across the county. Sometimes they are called into mental health situations with far-reaching implications. If you are serving us in law enforcement, and I'm going to add some categories to this. If you're serving in law enforcement, public safety, just stand up all over the room. A first responder, or if you work in any way in the courts or the criminal justice system or in healthcare, please stand up wherever you are, any of those categories. I want to also include And I want to also include education. We appreciate you, and we are grateful for what you do. I know that may have started feeling like an altar call there for a moment. I apologize. But I want to emphasize the challenges that those who serve us in these roles deal with every day. Our public safety officials are often a first point of contact for people suffering certain severe mental illnesses. Recently, the Florida Bureau of Investigations contacted our Greene County Fugitive Apprehension Unit at the Sheriff's Office to make us aware of an ongoing investigation with a suspect that was residing in Greene County, a person who had moved into our county and was making numerous online posts in regard to murdering politicians and asserting they possessed the weapons to act on these threats. The person was residing in a pull-behind trailer at an RV park in Greene County. Our sheriff's deputies developed a plan to safely secure him. This person fought in an extreme fashion, injuring officers and even our canine resources. Once he was secured, his family members confirmed he had an untreated, serious mental health diagnosis. And due to his illness, he believed he was on a spiritual mission to cleanse the United States. Later in the investigation, it was confirmed this person did in fact have firearms and ammunition in his camper. Deputies intervened in a safe, yet effective, well-thought-out way before a mental health crisis triggered an unfortunate event. I believe their actions prevented at least a murder and possibly a mass shooting. This person is currently receiving mental health services and is still going through the court process and is, of course, innocent until proven guilty of their charges. All right, I need to wrap up for today, and I apologize for the heavy nature of the material, but we need to talk about this. So let me sum it up. Not addressing the mental health crisis is costing us not just millions of dollars in money spent cleaning up the misfortunes and unaddressed needs, but it is also costing us quality of life and actual lives. Many of us have personally seen the impact of untreated mental health issues on family and friends. We see it in many ways every day at the county. We do not yet have all the resources, all the answers, and frankly, we don't even know that we have all the questions. But we can, and we must as a community go upstream. The Commission is dedicated 100% to working with anyone in order to develop broader solutions, and we thank everyone who is doing anything. As a community, we cannot accept the abysmal mental health care anymore in this country. We begin here and we take care of ourselves in this area. We do that first. We must scale up. We have so many pieces of a good healthcare system, but we also have gaping holes and systematic problems. We are a healthcare hub, but we could be a mecca. It would change our paradigm and our business opportunities for literally a generation, and perhaps even save one. We have to look forward to the future and not just conceive of a better way, but make a better system of mental health care for all of our people. We have a good start, but may today be the start of community conversations that change tomorrow in a way that none of us might dream of on our own. Together, I know that we can. Thank you very much.